Now hear the word of the Lord from 1 Kings 11, 1 through 13. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, he married women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and from among the Hittites. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, "You must not marry them, because they will turn your hearts to their gods." Yet Solomon insisted on loving them anyways. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. And in fact, they did turn his heart away from the Lord. In Solomon's old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods. Instead of being completely faithful to the Lord his God, as his father David had been, Solomon worshiped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. In this way, Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to follow the Lord completely, as his father David had done. On the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, he even built a pagan shrine for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and another for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. Solomon built such shrines for all of his foreign wives to use for burning incense and sacrificing to their gods. The Lord was very angry with Solomon, for his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. He had warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen to the Lord's command. So now the Lord said to him, "Since you have not kept my covenant and have disobeyed my decrees, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servants. But for the sake of your father David, I will not do this while you are still alive. I will take the kingdom away from your son. And even so, I will not take away the entire kingdom. I will let him be the king of one tribe, for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, my chosen city." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Well, good morning, Sojourn. Peace be with you. It's good to be with you all this morning. Welcome if you're a guest or you're visiting with us. My name is Jonah, and I'm one of the pastors here at Sojourn. If you're looking to get plugged in, this is the kind of time of year where we're starting new stuff. I really don't like announcements, but there's only so many ways to do it, so I just got to give you guys some announcements. And all of these announcements have to do with getting more involved if you want to make Sojourn your home or you're more curious about what's going on here at the life of our church. We have 3 core rhythms, how we live together as God's people in this little corner of the Midtown, Uptown neighborhood. We sing together, we serve together, we study together. Singing together, this is what we do. We gather here in the worship service as part of giving all of Sunday to the Lord. We take one service time and we come together to sing and to worship God together. Studying together, we have this where we'll hopefully hear some Bible stuff here in a minute. We study the scriptures in Adult Bible Fellowship, Sunday Bible Fellowship. That's a Bible study for all ages that meets during the 9 a.m. service and the 11 a.m. service. It's kind of conversational dialogue around the scriptures, follows the lectionary. And then we have several classes. 2 classes that I want to let you guys know about. Classes rotate throughout the year. We have a couple coming up. On the 13th and 14th of February, we have what's called our orientation class, which is to orient you to the life and culture of our church. This is where we'll talk about our core values and our mission as a church. And so if you're curious kind of what's below the hood here, why do we do things the way we do, what opportunities are there for you, I really encourage you to come check that out. That's Friday, September 13th, which will be kind of like a dinner party vibe. And then we'll provide breakfast and lunch for you next day on Saturday. You can RSVP going on the app, fill out a Connect card, stop by the welcome table, but we need an RSVP for that. So orientation class is coming up the 13th and the 14th. And then every couple of years, we run a class called the Sacred Journey, which is an introduction to the Enneagram personality profile. It's been a few years since we've done that, and we're doing it again September 30th. What I'm about to say is confusing, and I hope that somebody it makes sense for and you can explain it to everyone around you. We are running the same class twice in a row. So it's one 4-week class that we're running twice for a total of 8 weeks. Does that make a little bit of sense? Class 1, week 1 through 4. Class 1 repeated, weeks 5 through 8. Why are we doing that? We've been wanting to do co-ed classes as part of our formation school for a long, long time. And it's just tough where most of us have a lot of little kids at home. And so we were trying to think of what is a format that would allow co-ed classes. So this will be each one of these 2 classes that are the same class. It'll be co-ed, but we wanted to run them close together so that if mom wanted to go to the first round, dad could go to the second round, and it would be close enough that they could talk about it. Because the Enneagram, it's a self-awareness tool, and it's intended to help you see how you learn to relate the way you do, and how Christ might be inviting you into healthier ways of relating to yourself, to God, and to others. So it'll have significant impact on your relationships. So men and women will be in the class. It's not a married couples class. It's just a class for all men and all women. And you can sign up for that in all the same places. I think we have a link, maybe. Is there a link? I don't know. Bobby was supposed to make a link. You can sign up online. You'll get emailed a test, and you'll get to take it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's one of my most favorite things we do. I hope you guys can do it. And then today, if you're new, if you're visiting, we serve, and we call them trimesters. So when you agree to serve in one of our ministries, it's a 4-month commitment. Today marks the start of a new trimester, so some people are rolling off. You may have noticed new people holding the doors open for you. We've got a whole new Connect team. And so there's still some spots on the Sojourn Kids team if you want to serve this trimester. So again, you can sign up on the app, at the welcome table. Really, everything I just said is on the events tab at the app. You guys know how to download apps at this point, right? If you've downloaded, just search Sojourn and download an app and go to the events tab, and it's all there. Those are my announcements. Can we move on? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, I am just so tickled that you guys laughed when Emily was reading the story for us. This is in total, The Fall of the House of David is like a 14-week series, and we're just like scratching the surface of these stories. I cannot encourage you strongly enough to read the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings on your own at home. The stories are wild, and they are some of the most fundamental stories of the Bible. So this is our 4th week in the series called The Fall of the House of David. The first 3, we looked at Israel's ascent into really a world superpower. And we've learned lessons about God's ideals all along the way. And for you haters out there, congratulations. We've made it to week 4, and the collapse is upon us. We will begin seeing a several hundred-year collapse of the house of David. We began in our first week learning that kingdoms thrive through listening to and dependence on God. And so the posture of the kings, the hearts of the kings, they were supposed to be listening servants, ears opened, deeply dependent on God. And we learned that when dependence is traded for decadence, empires collapse. So when we move away from this posture of listening, curiosity, humble dependence on the Lord, towards one of self-reliance, self-pleasure, our own interests above all else, that is what leads to the collapse of empires. And I'll tell you, not just the collapse of empires, but the collapse of individual lives as well. Israel's journey to a monarchy began with a warning. God said to them, in essence, death comes from divided hearts. Death will come to you personally and to this nation as our hearts divide. We looked at Deuteronomy 17 in the first week, where God gave them instructions for how his kings were supposed to serve. And here's just one example of the instructions he gave them. The Lord said, the king must not make many wives for himself, because they will turn his heart away from the Lord. Where we left Solomon last week, he had just married an Egyptian princess, and that resulted in a lasting peace between Egypt and Israel. By chapter 11, you all heard the crazy part, right? Where he didn't just have one Egyptian princess for a wife. He had 700 princesses, 700 wives of royal birth. And if the 700 weren't enough, you notice he had 300 concubines as well. If my math holds, that's 1,000 women. That's a slightly, he missed the mark a little bit there when God said, only have a wife. Don't have a lot of them. He's like, how about 1,000? And let's see how that works. God said to him, death comes from a divided heart, but Solomon didn't listen. He let his heart get divided in 1,000 different directions. Listen to this description. This blew my mind. Verse 1, it said, now King Solomon loved many foreign women. I thought maybe I could have a really clever interpretation here, and we could dig into the etymology and meaning of this word loved. It's a Hebrew word, right? And so surely it means something like manipulation, or he wanted to say, but really this is the Hebrew here means loved. It love, like he loved them. He actually enjoyed them. He liked them. He cared for them. What's important for us to note here, maybe I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say this. This verse is not about the dangers of women. This verse is about how the human heart works. God did not say, hey, listen, women are going to try to destroy your ministry and monarchy, so watch out for them. He's saying, don't let your heart get divided into all kinds of different places. It's not a verse about women being dangerous to the life of faith, but the dangers of a divided heart. And so something you need to know about God, maybe you don't know this, I hope you know this, but when God tells us to do something, it is always for the sake of life. Meaning, if we listen to what God says, life goes better for us. If we don't listen to what God says, life gets worse for us. God, maybe no one's ever told you this, but God is not a buzzkill. When I meet with folks, and granted, people don't usually ask to meet with their pastor because of how great everything is going, right? Maybe I have an unfair, biased sample here. But when people come to talk, I often hear stories about people who feel like God is watching them, and his commands are this test to see if we're going to succeed or fail. The rules God gives us are like the questions on the test, and he's constantly watching to see how we're going to do. And so God gives you some test, whatever. Here's the thing you're supposed to do. And if you don't do it, he'll give you a flat tire on the way to work. You ever had that kind of experience? Your roof leaks, and you're like, you start wondering, what is the sin that I committed that God is not punishing me with this? So I better go to the Bible and find the rules that I need to follow to make sure that God doesn't leak my roof again this week. Most of us have the rules all wrong. Like, that is not the way of God. The Bible affirms that for us, that this is not how God works. So just give you one example. Solomon's dad wrote a song, and at one point he's speaking to the Lord. He says, your word is a lamp to guide my feet and a light for my path. Your instructions are a light to my feet, a guide to my path. God's word, including his rules, light our path. Why would you light a path during the nighttime? Why do you bring a flashlight with you when you go on a walk at night? If you go walking in the woods without a light at night, what might happen? Anybody? Get lost? Fall? Oh, there's a cliff. Oh, there's a rattlesnake. Oh, there's a tree. Like, you light a path so you get to where you're meant to go. You get to where you want to go. God's instructions, God's commands are for the sake of life, to get us where we're going, not to kill our buzz, not to power play us. So when God says don't have many wives or any number of other rules, he does so because death comes from divided hearts. He's saying, Solomon, things are going to go bad if you don't listen to me on here. And if some of you want to know what that looks like, because I bet there's somebody in here that's like, man, 1,000 wives, Solomon's fabulously wealthy. I bet that was kind of a dope life. I bet that was great. Some of you need to go read the book of Ecclesiastes and hear old man Solomon's reflections on how life went for him. Here in chapter 11 of 1 Kings, Solomon's about to die. The book of Ecclesiastes is old man Solomon's reflections on how he's lived his life. And some of you who think there's a good idea in what Solomon's doing, you need to go read Ecclesiastes and see what he really thought about it. All of us need to go spend more time in the book of Proverbs. We're here at the end of his life. Solomon writes a letter, a whole book of the Bible to his boy, because don't all parents want things to go better for their kids than it went for them? And so Solomon's learned all of these lessons, and he writes them down for his son in the book of Proverbs. And here's one of the key verses in the book of Proverbs that Solomon wrote to his son after a lifetime living this way. He says, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Guard your heart above all else, because it determines the course of your life. I'm just asking this so I don't feel so alone right now. Was anybody ever told this was a dating verse? Anybody ever give this to you as a dating verse? Anybody? Man, the 9 o'clock was rough this morning. They looked at me like I was crazy. I'll just tell you, this is not a dating verse. Well, it kind of is, but not really. This is a life verse. This is about how human beings work. Let me show you in another translation. The NIV says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Is dating included in everything? Yeah, absolutely. So is the way you work. So is your parenting. So is the way you are friends. So is the way you talk on the phone. So is the way you spend your money. Everything you do flows from this place that the Bible calls your heart. Here's one of my favorites, same verse. "Keep vigilant watch over your heart." That's where life starts. Your heart. In the Bible, the heart, someone's going to get uncomfortable here. In the Bible, the heart is the source of your emotions, what some might call your feelings, which a lot of you have spent a lot of energy distancing yourself from. And the scriptures say your feelings are what drives you. Your heart, that's the place of desire, of longing, of your deepest loyalties and allegiances. That's what drives you. Most of us think that our rational thinking is what drives us. Anybody willing? I mean, that's how I've lived most of my life. If I have the right answers, I'll live right. And the scriptures say, no. Guard your heart above all else, because everything you do flows from that place. Not your thinking, not your rational, not your doctrine, God help us, from your heart, your deepest longings, your deepest desires. Everything you do flows from there. Your heart determines the course of your life. Your heart is where your life starts. And even if this is the first time you've heard somebody articulate this, you all knew that was true before I said it. Just come, let us reason together. Have you ever noticed how easy it is for you to not do something you didn't want to do anyway? Did you get what I mean? When I plan a month in advance that I'm going to weed our flower beds on this Saturday, and I walk out there on that Saturday, and off in the distance I see a wisp of a cloud. It's like, lightning. Right? I just really wanted to be inside. I wanted to do something fun and enjoyable. Like, it's just, I don't know, if you're like most people and you don't enjoy working out, have you noticed how easy it is to say, today just isn't my day? But on the other side of that, have you noticed your incredible capacity to find a way to get what you want? Have you noticed how unbelievably gifted you are at scheming your way into something that you really want? Isn't it amazing? Like, have you ever noticed someone that's really poor, but they find a way to get the newest iPhone? How did they do that? We don't know, but they found a way. Have you noticed when something terrible happens to your child, the incredible capacity you have to get the doctor on the phone or get the insurance company on the phone? Have you noticed how you found a way to get the tickets to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour? Whatever it is for you, when there was something that made your heart beat fast and I found a way to get that magic card that I couldn't afford. We all have something that you really, really wanted it, and you found a way. You sold this thing, and you picked up some extra hours there, and you stopped doing this, and before you know it, you found a way to get the thing. Why? Did it make sense? It didn't really make sense to take that trip. We didn't really have the money to do that. But boy, I just so badly wanted to see those cliffs, and I wanted to go to Disney one more time with my kids, and whatever it was, we have this incredible capacity to find a way to get the things that we want. The lesson for us in that, what God is trying to reveal to us, I think, through Solomon's life, is that humans are driven by desire and love. Desire and love are the fuel of the human soul. That is the engine of our lives. This just doesn't work with positive things too. This is why people will make destructive decisions that violate their own belief system. Maybe you've seen your pastor do this. Maybe you've seen someone, you ever find yourself saying, like, I never would have thought she would do something like that. I never would have seen him do something like that. Have you ever seen somebody do something, you say, that's crazy that they did that? If you get behind it and you understand what's driving that, it's not so crazy. It may not have been a good idea, but maybe it wasn't so crazy. A man is desperate to feel loved, and so he waves at his doctrine on his way to have an affair, because that's what he wants. A woman is desperate to feel accepted, so she waves at her doctrine on a way to get another drink. Solomon's life shows us what happens when someone seeks to have their deepest desires fulfilled apart from God and God's design. And I believe that the book of Proverbs was written in large part because Solomon was trying to save his kids from so much pain. Too much love spread in too many directions will destroy you. Death by divided heart is what comes. So here again, in 1 Kings 11, we are given a warning. Here's what's going to happen. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, you must not marry them because they will turn your hearts to their gods. Yet Solomon insisted on loving them. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and in fact, they did turn his heart from the Lord. Did you notice how it emphasized that he loved them? Is it wrong to love superficially at the top? If someone says, oh, I love them, is that just wrong? Is love wrong? Of course not. But before we bag on Solomon too much, again, this is how people work. If you're married, be careful how much you participate in this, what I'm about to say. If you're married, emotionally, I want you to remember your first Thanksgiving at your in-laws. Okay? Get there for a second? And I'm not saying husbands, remember when you were at your wife's house. I'm saying your spouse, your first Thanksgiving with the other family. Do you remember that weird tradition they had? You remember the one I'm talking about? Or do you remember the dish that they brought out? And you were like, this is Thanksgiving. What are we doing with... You remember the one thing you asked to be there that they didn't bring out? Someone remember something of what I'm talking about, yeah? That feeling of my first Thanksgiving in somebody else's tradition, and they're doing it all wrong. You remember how they just did it all wrong? You don't have to answer, but just remember how they were just doing it wrong. And in that moment, when your spouse and her family and his family are doing Thanksgiving wrong, you have a choice to make. Will I stand up for the truth and announce to them that, take your pick, sloppy joes are not Thanksgiving food. We don't need a magic spoon. Whatever. Whatever. Everybody's got weird traditions. Am I going to stand up for the truth of how Thanksgiving is supposed to be? Or will I try to keep my spouse and my mother-in-law happy? You remember that choice you had to make? And who among us has not chosen to keep our spouse and mother-in-law happy? Amen? Why? Do I avoid the weird thing and offend my spouse and mother-in-law? Or do I smile and go along with it? We all get this. Try to imagine you had 12 spouses with 12 Thanksgivings. Right? Imagine 100, 1,000. We all get this. We're going to side with love and the person that we go home with. And this is how it came to pass, that Solomon worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Moloch, the detestable god of the Ammonites. Did you notice as Emily was reading how it started talking about these detestable gods? It only called a few of them detestable. Well, why were they detestable? Why is Moloch detestable? Because to worship them properly involved the sacrifice of children. the third king of Israel, the heir to the house of David, in Israel, outside of Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives. And he's sacrificing children in the name of false god worship. In this way, verse 6, Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Death comes from a divided heart. All around Jerusalem, all around Israel, Solomon built these temples to keep his spouses happy. When wife 317 told him, hey, it's time to go to church, he said, yes, dear, I love you. I really love you. I'll build you a place where you can worship. Verse 9, the Lord was angry with Solomon. Why? For his heart had turned away from the Lord. Do you see it? He had warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen. The ideal that was set for us is dependent, humble, listening servants. And that's how Solomon started. Oh, he started so well. He started so much like his father David. But death comes through divided hearts. Let me show you a couple more pictures. In Deuteronomy 17, God didn't just warn him about having lots of wives. He said, don't make a lot of money. Don't build up great wealth for yourself, is what he said. Well, chapter 9, a few chapters before, we read that there were still some people living in the land who were not Israelites. These were descendants of the nations whom the people of Israel did not completely destroy. So Solomon conscripted them for his labor force, and they serve in the labor force to this day, to the day of this writing. So we see Solomon motivated by building up these impressive cities, these impressive structures. And do you know what do you call it when you take people who don't look like you, maybe people from a different country, and you kidnap them and you force them to work for you without payment? What do we call that? Yeah. So here, in the name of building up great wealth, the king of Israel is enslaving nations. Here's Bible trivia. You can participate in this. Can you think of any other story of a king who enslaved people in the Bible and made them work for him? Pharaoh in Egypt. Deuteronomy 17 said a king should not have a big army. Don't have a lot of wives, don't have a lot of wealth, don't have a big army. Themes of dependence. God warned them, if you get a king, he's going to want an army, and he's going to steal your kids to fill that army. 1 Kings 9, Solomon did not conscript any of the Israelites for forced labor. Wow, way to go. Instead, he assigned them to serve as fighting men, officers and captains in his army, commanders of his chariots and charioteers. He didn't make them slaves, he just made them soldiers to go die for him in the name of his great wealth and influence. More wealth, more army, more wives. Death comes from divided hearts. Solomon dies as an old man. His son, Rehoboam, becomes king. And on one of his first days on the job, all of Israel's leaders come to confront Solomon's son. And listen to how they describe King Solomon. Your father was a hard master. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. Can you think of another story in the Bible of a harsh king that demanded slave labor and imposed heavy taxes? Can you think of another story of a king crushing his people in the name of his own wealth and power? 1 Kings 3 to 1 Kings 11. Solomon begins his reign so much like David. Humble, listening, tender. And he ends his life a tyrant like the Pharaoh of Egypt. Some of you have been told that death comes from bad theology. Anybody? I've been told death comes from bad theology. But Solomon spoke directly with God at least 2 times. Solomon wrote entire books of the Bible. You cannot tell me he did not know that sacrificing children to Moloch was wrong. Solomon had better theology than me, better theology than you. Some of us have been told death comes from a lack of resources. Anyone? Or here's how we say it. If I had more money, then I would be generous. Anybody said that before? You don't have to raise your hand. But I'd be more like a Christian if I had more money. Solomon was probably the wealthiest human alive. Maybe you think death comes from a lack of information. If I had more books, if I had more time, if I could go get the degree. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. The life of Solomon is begging us to see and believe that death comes from a divided heart. Doctrine is important, money is important, answers are important, but it's not most important. Guard your heart above all else, because everything you do flows from it. That's where your life starts. Now, maybe some of you are saying, oh, I guess I'm not supposed to love my kids. I'm not supposed to love my job. I can't love anything. That's not what I'm saying. The Bible is begging us to see that there is a special place inside of us that is reserved only for God. The place where your confidence comes from. What is confidence? It's the belief that I am enough. Your job will not tell you you are enough. Your bank account will not tell you you are enough. Your relationships will not tell you you are enough. And if you're the least bit awake to your life, you know that's true because you've tried. You got the job. You got the relationship. And that voice still told you you're not enough. You're not enough. Your confidence comes from the Lord alone. Why are you enough? I'm made in his image and I belong to him. Only give your confidence to the Lord. Safety. The belief that I am okay right now, who I am. Where does that come from? The Lord alone. Your hope, the belief that into the future I will be okay. Where does that come from? The Lord alone. The place of our deepest desires, our greatest loyalties. It belongs to the Lord alone. Or to put it in the language of the scriptures, guard your heart above all else, because everything you do flows from it. Your heart belongs to the Lord. The more you place your confidence, your safety, and your hope in something other than the Lord, the more you will experience a kind of death. Solomon's own words that everybody in this room knows is true from Proverbs 14. There is a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death. Everyone in this room knows Proverbs 14 is true because you've experienced it. Covering up that thing seemed like a good idea. I don't want to get in trouble right now. Seemed like a good idea until the truth came out. Taking the shortcuts seemed like a good idea until you were exposed. Numbing the pain seemed like a good idea until your relationships were ruined. There is a path before each of us that seems right, but it ends in death. As Solomon would later say in the book of Proverbs, to the hungry, even the bitter tastes sweet. This is some of what Jesus means when he tells his disciples a few hundred years later, you can enter into God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The gateway to life is very narrow and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. Death comes by divided hearts, so turn your heart to the Lord. And I'll tell you, the road to life isn't hard to find because it's hidden. It's not. In fact, it has just been announced to you. It's not a secret. It's not a confusing message. Follow Jesus and turn your heart to the Lord. It's not hard to find because it's hidden. It's hard to find because we don't want it. It's hard to find because few are willing to receive the invitation, because it will mean you have to believe that your confidence can't come from your job anymore. Whatever your thing is. Your hope cannot come from your bank account anymore. And to lay that down and enter into that narrow gate will feel like a kind of death. It will feel foreign. It will feel awkward to give your confidence, your trust, and your hope to the Lord, but it is the only road to life, and that road is before you today. The narrow road is open to you, and the narrow road is the only road to life. So your invitation, and you need to figure out what this means for you. I can't do it for you. Your hope, your confidence, and your security belongs to the Lord. So give your heart to the Lord, because death comes when our hearts divide. If you're willing and able, stand with me and we'll pray together.